Let's look at this Fulani lamentation in Kwara State. Of course, for obvious reason of closure of cattle markets in about 7 local governments. We shall be looking at this together. But the major issue is the reason for the closure has to do with the insecurity occasioned by Fulani militias. As you have it, the umbrella body of Fulani in Nigeria is already prevailing on the state government to open the market. But the question I want to ask here before we go into the details is, why is the Fulani more interested in opening of the market rather than being interested in peace, rather than being interested in the protection of lives and property? Because if the reason for the closure of the market is to address insecurity, I want to believe that it should be their paramount interest to see that the insecurity is addressed before talking about the opening of the market. Because as far as I'm concerned, life of human being is more important than even the market itself. But before I go further into this conversation, let us look at this together. I read it from the Vanguard. It says cattle market closure. Miyetti Allah urges Kwara government's intervention. You go further to say that the Miyetti Allah Cattle Breeders Association of Nigeria, MAGBAN, on Friday appealed to the Kwara government to urgently intervene in the closure of cattle markets in 7 local government areas in the state. The appeal followed the closure of cattle markets due to insecurity by 7 local government chairmen in the Kwara South Senatorial District of the state. You go further to say that in a statement issued in Ilori, the Magban Kwara chapter chairman, Alhaji Shehu Garuba, described the move as hasty and lacking proper consultation with stakeholders, including traditional rulers. This is part of the areas I'm going. Look at his statement that the closure was hasty, that it lacked consultation with stakeholders, and particularly traditional rulers. Now the question here is, if closing the markets will stem the tide of kidnapping, will stem the tide of insecurity, why they look for solution, I think it's a better option. Then again, I think the major reason the Fulani is asking that the stakeholders, particularly the traditional rulers, are not consulted, because they know that once it comes to traditional rulers, they are the ones that hold sway at that level. Going to the fact that in Kwara State, in Ilori, we all know how the once Yoruba town was taken over by the Fulani. So the same people, because they have completely subjugated the area by imposing their own traditional rulers, by imposing their own kings here and there. So by that, he's now asking the local government chairman to revert to the stakeholders, which include the traditional rulers. The implication is that you are now going to meet their own people who are holding sway in terms of traditional rulers, and once you go to them, there is no way they will take any decision or any advice that will be against those of their friends and their relations, and of course their people who are committing the crime of insecurity in the area. So I think that best explains the reason they're even making that noise, that why don't you consult with stakeholders? Why don't you consult with the traditional rulers before making that move, saying that the move is hasty? I must say it's not hasty, because we have seen in recent time so many disturbance, so many videos that looks disturbing coming from that Kwara State. There are some communities that have been totally sacked by Fulani militias. And for me, if this closure of those cattle markets is going to be a panacea for peace, for security of lives and property, I think it's a welcome development. Because if that will not bring those who perpetrate crime, who kidnap, who kill, to the table to discuss, I think it's a welcome development. Because the big question is, why is the Fulani, the Miyetti Allah, more interested in the opening of the market more than the interest of the lives and properties of the people? Because all along, there have been serious insecurity occasioned by Fulani militia. There have been serious killing, maiming in that part of the country. None of the Fulani militia members, none of the Fulani Miyetti Allah members or Miyetti Allah as a body have come out clearly to call for how to end the insecurity. Now that there is a closure of markets to address it, they are not saying that there was no consultation with traditional rulers, there was no consultation with stakeholders. I want to encourage the local government chairman that if that action is necessary to stem the tide of kidnapping, of the activities of Fulani militias, then they should sustain it. Just as I encouraged federal government the other time that when Sheikh Gumi raised alarm that we have Mossad agents in Nigeria and that they will be targeting Muslim leaders. Just as I encouraged the federal government then, that if for any reason we have Mossad agents in Nigeria, and that's perhaps the reason we are seeing successes being recorded against Fulani militias, being recorded against bandits, like we saw the arrest of two Ansari terror leaders recently, that if that is the reason we are seeing those successes, they should sustain the tempo. Even as I do not have intelligence to decipher whether we actually have them in Nigeria or not. In the same vein, I'm encouraging the local government chairman, even the state government in Kwara State, that if the closure of the market is a necessary measure that is needed to stem the tide of insecurity in the state, they should sustain it. And force those who benefit from those businesses to come to the table to provide solution to the issue of kidnapping, killing, and all of that. Because as far as I'm concerned, life is sacrosanct. Any measure that is needed to address unnecessary wastage of lives and property is a welcome development. Okay, now let us even go further into the conversation. Going further, I said the proposed closure of cattle markets in Kwara South by the local government chairman without the knowledge of the traditional rulers, leaders, and operators is not justified. The question here is, why is the Miyetti Allah making reference to that the traditional rulers must key into it before it's closed? Because we understand that, just like I said earlier on, they are the ones that position themselves in those strategic areas of traditional rulers, having taken over Kwara State in the past through the fight between Afonja and Jamta Alibi in the past. So that is their ultimate aim. If not for governors that they do not have access or they are not the one who are in the position of authority in terms of governor, I think they would have concluded and finished their agenda in most of those states. The only thing that gives them shortcoming is most of those states where they do all these activities of disturbance, they don't have the number to become the governors of those states. Otherwise, they would have concluded their plan of total subjugation. Because you begin to wonder, we have a problem that borders on security of lives and property. And we know that the governor of the state has a responsibility to protect lives and property. Even the local government chairman in their respective capacities as chairman have a responsibility to protect lives and property. And they have come to the conclusion that closing the market is going to be a way to stem the tide of the insecurity. And somebody is now demanding, requesting that the government should intervene and ensure the market is open without even looking at the larger picture of safety of lives and property. That's why I said that it's very clear that if the closure of the market is a necessary measure to stem the tide of insecurity in the state, I think it's a welcome development. But that in a way force those who benefit from those evil activities, who do not want peace, that will force them to start thinking in the direction of peace. Because for me, life is sacrosanct. And any strategy to protect lives and property that is legitimate is a welcome development. I want to encourage the state government, or particularly Kwara State government, to key into the federal government proposal for forest guard. Because I can understand that in Kwara State, the activities of Fulani militias is very high. You look at see they are not yet certified with their conquest agenda, because having taken over the place in terms of monarchical system, coming back in this recent time to start maiming, killing in true militia, I must say is unacceptable. And that the only thing the government can do, talking about Kwara State government, is to go ahead to acquire monopoly of currency power through this federal government initiative of forest guard. Because we understand that Enugu State has shown the leeway. Enugu State, of course, has started engaging personnel for that purpose. We want to encourage other states to key into it, because it stands, even the president himself, talking about Tinubu, have made it very clear that those forest guard personnel will be empowered to do the job. So it's going to be a different ballgame. It's no longer going to be business as usual. But we understand that under the former administration of Muhammadu Buhari, it was not feasible for security arrangement at the state level to bear arm. Because we understand that for you to procure and bear and deploy arm at that level, you need an end user certificate that normally comes from the Office of the National Security Advisor. And this was lacking under the former administration of Muhammadu Buhari, because the then NSA under Buhari was not willing to give out such certificates. So for that reason, it was not possible and easy to address insecurity at that level. But now that the president himself even gave nod to issue of formation of state police, and now we are seeing that forest guard is already directive have been given out, where the president or rather the federal government have even directed state governments to start recruiting between 2,000 and 5,000 personnel, depending on their financial capacity. I must say it's a welcome development that all states that are currently facing serious level of insecurity must stay into it. Because personally, I'm a serious advocate that the state governors should not just be going by the name of the governors and the chief security officers of their respective states. Rather, that they should be given some level of security power to parade. But I want to believe that these have come to give steam, energy, tenacity to them in discharging that responsibility that is already incumbent in their office. So being aloof, saying aloof at this point is to say you are not interested in the welfare, in the protection of the lives and property of your people. So I want to believe that every governor that believes in the protection of the lives and property of his people must welcome this and must key into it with speed of light, because there's no better way to protect the people than for the government to synergize. I mean, talking about the 3 tiers of government to synergize and acquire monopoly of collective power to spot the bandits out of their hiding places, send them running and bring them to justice. Let me say very big thank you for your time. This is Mr.